Collins & Co.'s not-for-profit conference, Be Empowered Through Knowledge, is designed specifically for the not-for-profit sector. Our speakers are experts in this sector, and their practical approach provides not-for-profit board members and management with the opportunity to improve their skills and knowledge across a range of specialist topics. The conference also provides a great networking opportunity.
I'd like you to welcome Jess. She's going to talk to us today about HR essentials, contracts, position descriptions and handbooks. Thank you, Jess.
Thank you. I am going to ask everyone to move forward. It's a bit like a mullet, so it's business at the front, party at the back. So come forward for me, please. That way I then don't have to yell at you. Obviously, I respect that I am quite loud normally, so I may step away from the microphone. So obviously, thanks everyone for coming to this session today. I am a HR consultant. As mentioned, we deal with a range of clients, different levels and things like that. And I respect that some of the content may be a little bit boring in that space because that's what compliance is. So let's start us off. So as mentioned, obviously I'm Jess, I'm from Warrnambool. I moved to Melbourne 6 years ago. I still have strong connections within the community down there and go back quite regularly. Part of my, ethos is in being involved in the community I'm in the swim committee down there, so not as big as the Lawn Peter pub, but they have a swim series down there that I'm a part of in that space. I enjoy going to F45 and having a cheeky bubbles. The reason I tell you about this is obviously the nature of which we work in is people orientated. So our clients need to know who they're working with and what they're working with, so that when they see me come to a meeting or they call us on the phone, they actually know it's me. It's not someone in a call centre or a space like that. So that's a really important aspect of our organisation. So why HR and what is good HR? Well, obviously compliance. We do it with our bookkeeping, our accounting, so why not our people? People create the most problems in organisations. If you look at it, assets are on a balance sheet, cash flows on a balance sheet, but where's the people? They're the biggest liability in the organisation and they don't appear anywhere financially. So it might be that you think the people in your organisation are good. What happens when they go to a barbecue and they hear from other people? That's where we find the biggest problems are created, because they get someone else's opinion and they don't respect and identify what's actually happening in their organisation compared to someone else's, and it's not a like-for-like scenario. So we do it for compliance. Obviously, good HR is legally binding and it has backing, so it gives you that substance that you can actually rest assured that everything is okay, which obviously leads to assurance. So you can sleep at night knowing that your business and organisation is followed the appropriate processes, and that if anything happens, you've got that to back you. So in a more corporate space, Fair Work applications are $73 to lodge an unfair dismissal claim. The person can represent themselves and they're entitled to receive up to 26 weeks worth of wages as compensation. So you really don't want to get this wrong in terms of the staff and people within your business. So obviously they look at a document space. So if you've done the right processes and followed the right procedures, then the likely outcome of that will go your way. If it's not, there haven't been processes and procedures followed, it's going to go the employee's way. It's also peace of mind. It's nice knowing that you can go home when you're worrying about the core aspects of your business, not the people that are in it. So I guess the question is, how do we do these kind of things? And in our space, we talk about HR essentials, being contracts, position descriptions, handbooks. They're like the why, the what, and the how in business. So contracts, what should we focus on? Obviously, the National Employment Network has 10 standards that they base the level of employment under. We then have what's known as employment awards, and then we have best practice. So depending on how your organisation is set up, your staff may be employed under a different structure. So effectively, if you think of it as a pyramid, the National Employment Standards sit at the bottom, the awards in the middle, and then your best practices at the top. And what it does is a cascading effect means that if something's not in your best practice, it falls back to the award. If it's not in the award, it falls back to the employment standard. So it's like a bit of a backstop that you can be safe from. So we talk about having the contracts being what is it you're doing. So it has obviously the terms and conditions of the employment. Things like how many hours a week are you working? Are you entitled to overtime? Are you entitled to additional time in lieu? What leave aspects are you, how do you go through that process? What superannuation, what benefits are you getting in that capacity? So is there a corporate car park? Is there additional credit cards? What do you do if someone tries to contact you from the media for a comment on the organisation? Are you actually able to do it, or do you have to refer that on? So obviously, when we look at talking about contracts being reviewed, we suggest that it's every 2 years. There's legislative changes that come in that manipulate stuff, and while it mightn't be as adverse as what you think, it's actually not about the right here, the right now, it's the going forward. So having the ability to know, okay, we last reviewed them 2 years ago. When we did that, single touch payroll wasn't involved. Our contract states that we're going to pay super every second quarter. Now, obviously, I know that that's quite illegal, and that's why single touch payroll has been implemented. But little things like that, is the contract actually saying it's 9.5%, or is it still set at the old rate of 9? So that leads into the process of downloading on the internet versus getting something professionally made. We often see in our business that people have either had an employment contract from their prior job, they've downloaded something off the internet, or they've copied and pasted different stuff because it sounds pretty good. Now obviously, yeah, there's merit to that, but what about if you're missing the essential requirements? So that's the case. Have you got the right jurisdiction? We reviewed some last week and they were talking about US legislation. So their employees are only getting 10 days annual leave rather than the 20 that we have here in Australia. So things like that, it mightn't seem as much, but there's technicalities that you can get called out on because, again, the national employment standards dictate full-time employees in Australia get 20 days. So already you're not compliant there. And I guess, why do we need them? Again, it's the security. You hope that, and you trust the people that are in your team now, but you don't know who's coming into your organisation, who's leaving the organisation, what's in the media, what's creating hype. Like obviously, if you look at Corona at the moment, that has created tension among organisations. If you look at, say, something like the underpayment of wages from George Columbaris, that's triggered a review of remuneration for lots of other businesses. So there is uncertainty in the media that does create hype. So at least if you know that you have legally compliant contracts, that's step one of assurance. So we talk about position descriptions. So people go, well, why do I need a position description? What is it that you need it for? It's for role clarity. So the person coming into the organisation knows what their roles and responsibilities are. So what are they actually employed to do? It also sets out the role expectations of how do we do it, what do we do it, and why do we do it. There's no point hiring someone to be a bookkeeper if they don't have the necessary skills to be a bookkeeper to start with. But if then they're in the expectation that they're going to be the accountant for the organisation and they're the bookkeeper, there's going to be a mismatch and alignment of roles expectations and generally remuneration, because if they're a bookkeeper versus an accountant, there's a different wage and salary in that space. So it also gives employees an understanding of where they are in the workplace, and I guess obviously a chain of command. So obviously you've got the CEOs, the board of directors, the volunteers and things like that in a non-for-profit space, but how does everyone fit together and work together collaboratively, and who does it rely on? If this task is for someone, whose responsibility is it? Oh, it's that person because it's titled in their position description. So staff handbooks. Now, often, again, another document that's downloaded a lot off the internet is policies and procedures. So what this document does in our space is outlines best practice. So, for example, bullying, harassment is a large one that we see lots of people actually don't have any information around that. What's the process around if bullying and harassment is happening in your workplace? Obviously, with new laws in the manslaughter space for directors that could be liable for issues that are happening, or even staff committing suicide, it's a really scary space to be in. We want to make sure that your staff understand the expectations, they understand what they're doing within their role. So if I decide to go on annual leave because flights are really cheap at the moment, I don't book a holiday tonight and tell my boss that tomorrow, you know what, I got a cheap flight, I'm going to Bali tomorrow. It's actually, okay, the process is I need to apply for 2 weeks out from the holiday and have it approved, even though, and go through that space. So that's kind of, I guess, a backstop for all the actions that you're doing within your organisation. Another example of a good policy is a social media one. How do you want your people projecting their organisation out to the community? Do you want them to be able to have free rein? Do you want them to be able to maintain a certain standard and expectations? We talk about in our strategic plans having a brand, and Gordon touched on it as well. You want to be a united front. So if your staff aren't supporting that outside the scope of their roles, then are you able to control that a little bit? So one of our clients obviously is in the fitness industry, and so they're not allowed to have any handles that promote the business that they work for, but they're encouraged to post videos of themselves in the gym. So you go, well, hang on, if they can't identify the gym they're working in, but then they're encouraged to post, there's going to be a mismatch or discourse amongst that. So how do we come around that? Well, we amended the policy. It also means that there's measurable outcomes. So if, for example, I decide that I guess the best case scenario here, expectations of the employee. The dress code is also another common one that we attach. Is it acceptable to be in a corporate environment in shorts and runners? You're presenting at a meeting or a conference. Is that what the organisation wants to project into the public, or is it you're pretty casual, you don't really mind, that's not your core business? So that's another one as well. It's a measurable. If I rock up in shorts, I know that I'm going to be sent home. That's another good one. So how do all the elements, I guess, of these documentations link? Because I've talked about the what, the how, and the why. We cross-reference the information in the position description to the contract. So if there's any changes that need to be made, the contract isn't being updated. It's the document that sits outside it. The handbook also then feeds back into the position description. So how do I do my job with the support of the business? The support of the business is based in the policies and procedures, and that allows me to do my role efficiently. It's also part of the employment life cycle, so you can measure what's actually happening in that space. And I guess obviously it's that outlines the obligations of the business and the organisation back to its employees, and that mutual respect. Like obviously everyone here tries to be encouraging, collaborative and those kind of things, but you want your staff to have the same level of respect. So if you set the tone, and it's that classic tone from the top stuff, if you set it there, they can come back at you in that space. So case study, one of our clients rang us and they had no contracts, no position descriptions and no handbooks, and they wanted to make some people in their organisation redundant. So there's a few ways that this can happen in the employment space, depending on what's actually in writing. In this case, there was nothing in writing. So it defaults back to the National Employment Standards. Now there's a few rules and regulations around whether redundancy pay is made, depending on the size of the organisation. So if there's less than 15 staff, then you don't have to pay redundancy out. Our client thought because they had 5, they had to pay out this person all this redundancy pay because they'd been with the organisation for 7 years, which obviously wasn't the case because they fitted into this category. However, they didn't know where to start. What's the starting point if you don't have any contracts? Like verbal agreements, happened to someone that was an ex-director who had retired and moved businesses. How do you enforce a golden handshake, so to speak? So you default back to the National Employment Standards by Fair Work, and that time was equivalent of 6 weeks national leave because the person was over 45. So again, there's additional requirements of the person's age. And so we were able to come in, look at what they had in place, and because they had nothing, advise that, well, actually, you're under a small business, that doesn't apply. You're only entitled to pay out their notice period. The notice period isn't in the contract, but Fair Work dictates that length of service to the organisation is this many weeks payout. So that was a good outcome for us in that space. So I guess, obviously I've talked about the documentations that were required, and one of the things that we often see is active versus reactive. It's a lot easier to be active in the HR space than to be reactive. And unfortunately, no one really enjoys this part of it, but it's all administration based. You have to document, and have an adequate storage system. So if you're having difficult conversations, which no one really likes to have in organisations, you need to document it. It's okay that you've had the organisation, but it has to be acknowledged, whether it's in an email to yourself, because it's got the time and the date stamp on it, or a note put on the employee's file, because if something happens 6 months down the track, you can't recreate that conversation and it becomes hearsay as evidence. So if you've got the email, you've had the conversation, you can produce that, and that's a safeguard from your perspective. Obviously, a document storage system is also really important, because unfortunately we look at the bushfires. The fact that that information was burnt isn't a excuse that you can rely on in Fair Work if something happens, or worse, you get taken to court. Electronic documents, obviously, as we can see with single touch payroll and things like that, are becoming the norm. You can download it on your phone, you can sign it, have a Google Drive where each file is related to a different employee, and every communication that you have with that employee just gets sent straight up in the Google Drive. It's simple, it is time consuming to set up, but it becomes part of the norm once that happens. Employee details. So obviously legally, if you're employing anyone in Australia, you have to give them the tax file declaration form, you have to give them the superannuation choice form, and you have to give them the Fair Work information statement. Now that Fair Work information statement was updated at the start of the year, so if you do have a copy of that now and it needs to be updated, just jump on the Fair Work website now and they'll be able to download a new one. So you also need to obviously keep that information for 7 years. So why do we do all this? I guess it's the culture of the organisation, the feel. If you're compliant, your culture's going to come with it because everything's running as a smooth ship. Now I know that that's not necessarily the case, and it doesn't always work out to be that way because there's one outlier or there's two outliers, or you just get busy. We've all been there where you've had 100 tasks to do and you've got to 98, but those last two are just that little bit out of reach and you hope that you can get it done soon, but they're the two that are going to come undone. By having all these documents as well, your staff will feel safe, secure, and all those things that you want them to do. You're doing the right thing by your employees and you hope that they do the right thing by you. It also means that you're approachable. No one likes to think that they hold a position of authority where no one can come up and talk to them, because what kind of culture is that creating? You want to be inclusive and you want it to be rewarding, because at the end of the day, they're the ones doing the work for you. So where to now? I mean, obviously we're all in different organisations, different sizes, different projects, different funding capacities and things like that. So if you think that anything that I've spoken about today you need to brush up on, or you want a review of some documents, get in touch. We work with clients from a range of industries and things like that I said before. What we are willing to offer today is a complimentary, comprehensive audit of current documents that you've got, just to see where you're at and where you're going and if there's any gaps or anything like that. So if you want to do that, reach out or come see me during the lunch thing. These are our contact details. But any questions, or does anyone want to run through? I'm happy to run through another case study. Yeah.
Just about consequences of the breach, do I put myself down to
Yeah. To the old, yeah, different stages of adaptation.
And you don't want to be using it because you actually want to bring people along. What are your sort of suggestions?
Yeah, definitely, that's a good one. So did everyone hear that question? So about changing culture. So one of the challenging things, obviously, when there's change of leadership is different opinions. So team planning days, and they can be formal or informal, are a great way to allow people to voice their concerns. So I think people feel validated when at least they have the opportunity to give their opinion. It doesn't mean that you're going to take it on, but it's at least the opportunity. So things like staff surveys, coming together and having a brainstorming idea are really good starting points for that kind of work, because then what you can do is take all the ideas and then say, collectively come away and go, okay, these are all the ideas that we had at this time. These are ones that we think, because again, different thought patterns, let's take that and implement that. And that's where a handbook kind of does come into that capacity, because you can go, right, as a result of the consultation process, we all brainstorm these ideas, we redefine them, we've looked at them, this aligns with our goals. Okay, let's bring everyone together, and now here's how we do things the new way. Yes, it's changed from what we do, and we respect that there's going to be a timing difference between the different stages of adaptation, but at the same time, line in the sand, going forward, this is just how we do it. Like if you think GST, like 2000, like I think it's 10 years ago, but it's actually 20 years ago. No one wanted to pay GST on any products or services, whereas now it just becomes the norm. So if you can encourage people to feel included and that the decision hasn't been just dictated from the top, I think that's a really great way. And I mean, obviously I know my business partner Jenna's going to talk it in her section, but infrequent coffee catch-ups are also good. Where are people at? Like, we're all humans. Like, if something's happening outside their space from work that's influencing on their current capacity to function, like I know we all use the, I need a coffee, but is it really the coffee that you need to keep you going? Or is there a bigger issue behind it that, okay, yes, you haven't slept the night before because you've been up with a child for 4 hours. Having a coffee might help instantaneously. It's not going to solve that issue going forward. So some of the reframing space and going, okay, yes, my opinion is this, but I can see their opinion coming from that side. Yeah, maybe that might be the right way. And it is challenging because there's different peoples and different personalities. And one of the things that you can do, and it's called a DISC assessment, and it's different ways of thinking and different way people approach different problems. So if I said the sky is blue, and then you turn around and say the sky is green, I'm going to go, no, it's blue. Like, it's always been blue. But that's just because of the way that I think is going to come to that conclusion. And it's obviously knowing the personalities that are in your organisation, which comes from having regular catch-ups. So the better you know the people, the better your business will run based on the relationships and things like that. Sure.
Two very different ones. The first one, I guess, is this the exact same process for volunteers when you've got volunteers working alongside workers?
Obviously, volunteers are different to alongside paid workers because you would still encourage them to follow the procedures of the business. Obviously, you're not paying the remuneration that's associated, but yeah, I would definitely have their information because, again, if something happens to them, duty of care, you're responsible under that capacity. In terms of having the expectations of the organisation as well, definitely for volunteers. You might have like an engagement document rather than an employment contract, like a certificate of engagement or mutual understanding, whereby the volunteers sign off to say, yes, even though I respect that I'm a volunteer, I still have standards that I have to uphold because at the end of the day, we know that events can't run without volunteers, but we also don't want to be exposed to anything that they may bring on without being fully briefed. And it's funny, people go, oh, but I didn't know that. So with all these documents, a contract has to be signed. Position description, we encourage them to sign, and the staff handbook, we encourage them to sign as well. Because when you get that back, if there's a breach in any of those documents, you can say, hey, but you signed off on this. And then that starts another separate process down there. So it's all about processes and bringing awareness to people. And the other?
The other one was we're very, very new into getting employers.
Yes.
And how storing our stuff safely, you're saying in the web.
Yeah.
Do you have suggestions of different?
Yeah, so obviously a Dropbox or a Google Drive is a really kind of simple way that you can do it. Yeah. So it's password encrypted. You can use another, it depends how technically savvy you are, but you can use things like MyGlue, which is a password, I guess, website where it stores all your passwords and encrypts the passwords and gives you those passwords that aren't my surname plus my address number or things like that, or my initials and my date of birth. It will give you safe passwords. So storing information like that and using that system will help in that place. It's also good that being cloud-based, if something happens and say you're on holidays or someone else needs to access it, it's not a laptop that you've actually got the document saved on your computer. It's in the cloud. So if I go to Sydney next week for another client, one of my Melbourne client rings, I can pull that information and see it straight away. So it's about easeability in that space. Cool. Any other questions?
Just a comment, I just say for engaging volunteers, we need to actually emphasise the document because there have been cases where volunteers
Yeah, so obviously one of the other things, and I'll touch on it because I've got a little bit of time, I wasn't sure how we were going, whether I had to make up some time or not, so I did cut some slides out. But one of our clients, obviously I know I mentioned the fitness industry before, it's a big thing in our space. Are they contractors or are they employees? So it's challenging, and we have a really good fact sheet, I must say, on this space. But are they paid for a project, or are they volunteering for a project that's a specific defined time? Are they bringing the tools of the trade with them, or are you providing it to them? Are you giving them an email address from your organisation? Are they wearing your uniform? They're different, I guess, identifiers that you can say, okay, well, they are a subcontractor or they are an employee. Are their hours regular and systematic? That's a big one. So often as well, if you look at there's full-time, part-time and casual staff, a casual staff member, what's the definition of a casual staff member? In hospitality, it might mean you work Monday, Wednesday and then Friday. That week, the following week, you work Tuesday, Thursday and then Sunday. That's casual because it's not regular. If you are casual and you're working every Monday, every Wednesday and every Friday from 9 till 4, I'm going to argue that that is pretty consistent, and it comes under the definition of a part-time employee being regular and systematic, because even though you're being paid as a casual, the definition of what you're doing in the eyes of the law falls under part-time. So it can be definitely tricky identifying which category people in your organisations fall into, because you don't want someone to turn around and say, actually, I've left your organisation, but I was doing regular hours, I want superannuation now. And no disrespect to accountants, but we found that in our space, if they go, oh, we're not sure if that subcontractor is an actual employee, just pay him super and it'll be okay. There's a few more, am I right? Yeah, so there's a few more characteristics as well that you have to go through to determine. And the ATO has a, I guess, calculator's the wrong word, but it determines whether someone is a contractor or an employee. Depending on which answer you put in, you get a different response every single time. So it's not an easy space to operate in. So it's actually better just to go through and go, okay, what are their responsibilities? Now, often when we talk about position descriptions, people at the top go, I don't know what they do. What do they do? Like, I know I've got a junior accountant in my business, but do they do BASs? Do they do tax returns? Like, I don't know what they do. I know that they're doing work because I can see their productivity report. So in developing position descriptions, it's useful to get people to write down top 10 things you do, because then you'll find that's either overarching elements and you can go, oh, well, that's the same as that, so let's call it administration or things like that. So the people doing the work are the ones that are the best to equip you with that information of, okay, this is what I do from that space. So don't be afraid that in any of this process to reach out to your people. You can't be across every element of your organisation and know every single task. Micromanaging, you're not going to get anywhere if you're trying to manage everyone to manage their own individual things.
Jess, what's your view about using social media as part of your reference checking?
As part of your reference checking, I'd question, what do you hope to gain from looking at someone's social media? Is it you want to know about them, what they do outside their life? Is it you want to know what kind of person you bring to the, like, why are you checking social media and what do you want to do it? Like, you want to know that I'm going to be out there talking and I'm going to be at the races on the weekend, so therefore I'm social because you want to engage someone that's social in your organisation? Or are you checking my social media to say that I've got 4 books and so therefore I must be studious because I've posted a picture of me studying 4 books? So it's more so the why. You're hoping that I'm just trying to think of a bad example. What can someone bad do on social media? Yeah. Okay. I'll take a water while you tell me.
This was quite bizarre. So we were recruiting a person and one of my executive managers just Googled the person and found that they'd written a pornographic book. An extremely fruitful. And some of our staff thought that it was probably not fair to actually go down that track. We took the view that maybe her values were not quite in line with us as an organisation, and so we decided not to proceed with it. But it was an interesting dialogue with some of my staff about the fairness of doing that.
Yeah, and I definitely think that's why there are security settings on social media. And yeah, and so I guess there's an element of, if you're an individual posting and you know that that's going to happen to you going forward, why aren't you being upfront in the first place? Like, I know obviously it's not a thing that you kind of slip into conversation. By the way, I wrote a porn book. How do you feel about that? Like, I don't know, is that another question? Like, when you get to the end of the interview and go, any other questions? And they go, oh, by the way, I wrote a porn book. How do you feel about that? Like, it's not a regular situation. I guess obviously you answered your own question there and said it comes down to the values of the organisation. So
it was just interesting from the dialogue you had with a range of staff.
yeah, and it's interesting because one of my clients before Christmas rang and said, I've got the most unusual scenario. And I thought, I work in HR, hit me up. And one of their clients at 3 a.m. had texted their manager to say that in the middle of the night he'd stood on his glasses and couldn't come into work for the next 2 weeks. And we went, why 2 weeks? Like, surely you've got a spare pair of glasses, or you can get you're texting, so I don't know how visually bad it is, but anyway, so they tried to consult with the employee to get him to go to Specsavers, and they offered to pay to buy him glasses. Anyway, he refused to do so, and it was just a case of, really? And it was an accounting practice as well, so they were trying to get end of year stuff done. And by chance, they were just like, look, unfortunately, you're still in probation. You've effectively abandoned your job because you're not responding to any of our text calls or emails. And it happened to be by chance that one of the partners went on their social media site, and here's a picture of the employee in Queensland with his family wearing his glasses on holiday. And so we were like, without social media, so it's the be alert and alarmed, but I think it's not going anywhere, so you just have to learn to live with it.
Maybe when we say that we might perform a police check, we should also be saying that we might perform social media check.
Yeah, definitely, and not all organisations. It depends on the nature in terms of what the actual. I mean, who has an EBA in there? So they're pretty tight documents in terms of what you can and can't do. So depending on what's actually in that as well, that dictates pre-employment checks, pre-employment medicals. I mean, some people just will give you that information. It's just like, okay, settle down. I'm asking for your reference, not your employment pack coming forward. So yeah, it's again a policy. Do you have a policy that you want to do a social media and you need to know the handles of everything, or are you just okay knowing that you've spent enough time understanding the person? And obviously that's why 2-round interviews, I know it's off topic to what we're talking about, but 2-round interviews, so one person obviously comes in, meets with 2 others, and then the next time around you have one of the same people and another person as well, because then you've got 3 people's opinions. And so if you can't, from 3 people's opinions, get to a conclusion about that person, you've then obviously got the probation period, so you've got 6 months to work out whether they're right for the organisation. If you're a small business entity, so classified as under 15 staff, that probation period actually extends to 12 months. So if you haven't got an idea of what someone's like in 12 months and what they've achieved, then you've got to kind of look at your recruiting process. Cool. No worries. Thanks, everyone.